All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our July 2nd. Wow, July already. Jupyter Frontends call. And this will be a special accessibility um, topic focused one since it's the first meeting of the month. I'm Danielle. I'll be your host today. This is a place for all contributors to get together and connect with the community about JupyterLab and Notebook and frontends and accessibility. And I don't see any first time participants, but if anyone does join, welcome. This call is being recorded right now and we'll post it later on Jupyter for the community to view. And we're also part of the Jupyter community and we follow the Jupyter Code of Conduct. And we'll leave some time at the end with the meeting recording off if anyone has some topics for that as well. So the focus of the meeting will be accessibility topics first. I don't see any accessibility topics so far. Um, so maybe if everyone could think about that, I'll also look on the issue board and see if there's anything that's marked needs triage or discussion with accessibility. Mike, I saw you had a topic, and then also there was the topic we talked in triage yesterday that I could start with as well. And then, yeah, while everyone else is thinking of topics they want to discuss. Um, so the first topic, let me share my screen if that's okay. There was a issue that came in from the team working on the Zeus CPP kernel about needing cell execution number. Um, and so they were kind of asking for um, some type of execution count so that they could access what cell is being run. And it sounds like there's been a lot of previous discussions about stuff like that. So Mike and I were talking about in the triage meeting, maybe to bring it into this meeting to have a wider discussion about it. Um, and I think some of the discussion was about, hey, do you really need execution count? Because maybe it's not available when you start executing with the kernel, and also some other approaches from the community. I guess does anyone? I think Mike, you have some background in previous discussions, or does anyone else have anything they would like to add?
So someone brought up that currently this is done, like the identification of the cells is done using hashing function. Specifically, we are using murmur hash. Um, in addition to that, we now also have cell IDs, which seem like a reasonable approach for identifying cells. Uh, but yes, I do not recall what was the discussion and decision uh, or rationale for using murmur hash, but that is a combination of cell ID and potentially additional information should allow to uniquely identify a cell. I am not sure if execution count itself is a useful proxy.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Mike. So it sounds like the solution we're looking for is figuring out what cell is being executed by the kernel. And if, yeah, I guess the question is, do we have like a recommended way to do that? Or do we need a recommended way? And Nick, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, we've had this for a long time, like 5 years. This is, I mean, I think you have to turn on some flags in your kernel, but IPython's been doing it. Yeah, it gets the cell ID already. Execute all, yeah, you get cell IDs. It's in the parent metadata. We send it already. I'm dropping a link in the chat. But any document that is not, anything that has types or startup areas or whatever has needed this forever. So I wouldn't go and start introducing new things. This predates there even being a cell ID in NB format because the client was calling it something. So there's something in there.
Yeah, so specifically this request is about the debugger, and debugger doesn't include that in the dump cell.
So it makes up its own file system, but doesn't do cell IDs. Oh, magnificent! What have we done?
And I think like this should be like a non-controversial addition. Technically, it seems like this would need to be a change in NB format, not NB format, NB client repo, which includes the reference for the messaging protocol in Jupyter. And I guess these are the next steps. Now, whether we should also include execution count and whether we should deprecate the hashing approach, I do not have enough insight into the hash, and I'm not sure. Personally, like I see why user might like to see the execution count if there is like a traceback, and in the traceback the cell is identified by execution count. I think IPython already does that, or IPyKernel. So maybe we could include all of that.
Yeah, I mean, execution count is a terrible identifier. You know, in an LSP setting, maybe in a debug adapter protocol because you're at a point in time, but pretty much anything else, it's not a good identifier.
So is the outcome that we think some sort of like cell ID for debugger should be like supported?
I think so. I think so because this is like an extension to the debugger adapter protocol, which lives in Jupyter messaging spec. And yeah, there are drawbacks to using the hash function. So the major drawback with using the hash function is that if you have two cells which are identical, you could get like if you set a breakpoint on one cell, it could actually break on the other cell. Let me write this down, and maybe I will propose that they open now. I wanted to say maybe they should open a pre-proposal for a JEP, but I'm not sure if this requires a JEP, if it's just a small adjustment. I don't know. What do people think?
So you're proposing changing the kernel message protocol?
Yeah, technically it is that because like it is the bugger adapter protocol extension, which is part of that. At least it is documented in the same place.
Yeah. So it seems like opening a JEP would
Yeah.
be any
Yes.
protocol changes need to go through a JEP for documentation, like reasoning, and because any protocol changes affect more than just Jupyter, right? Like William and other people that are implementing things on top of Jupyter presumably would need to be aware of this, at least if it was optional, and maybe implement it if they're using something that depends on it.
I would be just worried that it would stall it. we are unfortunately not. The JEP process is again not very active.
Yeah, I realized that. That's why I
And
grimaced as soon as you were like, "Does this require a JEPA?" Like, oh,
yeah,
but I mean, I think it's really important for things like this to be documented. Otherwise, we end up with this sort of the official kernel protocol and then the de facto kernel protocol
yep,
that has a bunch of extra optional stuff that people depend on, et cetera. I mean, you understand
absolutely,
that. Um,
absolutely. Like there is no like this would have to be a pull request to the NB client repo. If I'm not mistaken, that's the documentation and for the protocol is in NB client,
Jupyter client. Yeah.
in Jupyter client. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah,
so
I would
that's
love
absolutely a prerequisite. But now, in the past, we did add some messages which were only later documented, and that
uh-huh.
was not a very good practice.
I
Uh,
think it's fine to prototype, right? You can add optional metadata into messages. The metadata is a black box that you can just add things to, and so you can build out to refine the proposal and then propose it. Like it shouldn't stop you from experimenting. It may be in conjunction with the merge, or maybe we flag it as sort of experimental, etc. I guess one question I have is, um, will the debugger depend on this information, or will treat it purely optionally?
Specific kernels would depend specific implementation, yes. But I guess the front ends would not. For front ends, it would be just an information that they pass.
Right. So I guess is there a reasonable default for kernels to use if the front end is not going to pass in this data, which is currently a status quo. So hopefully there is a reasonable default. Yeah, I'm looking at this PR. Yeah, I'm curious what if you actually implement this out, like how it works out. It seems like it should work fine to put this LID in there. I guess that's what I would propose. Try it. Let's see how well it works out. And if it works out really well, then let's open an issue for the protocol. But do the experiment first, so you have a little bit of data, a little bit of experience with it before opening the jet. But then eventually, if it seems like a good idea and should be done across a lot of different kernels, or I mean, the front end should implement this so that kernels can use it. Then let's open a JEP, and then let's work on making the JEP process lightweight enough that it's not like a, oh man, we need to open a JEP reaction.
All right, anything else about that one? I think that's good guidance. All right, then next topic, Mike, you had a per cell button pull request you wanted to share?
Yes, so that's a pull request that Jason, the other Jason, opened 2 years ago, and I think it currently targets 4.5 just by the virtue of being bumped from the previous point release. Now, I would have some interest in including that, but at the time I was a little bit skeptical because what it does is it takes over the cell input area where there is execution counter, or also this star symbol, which indicates that the cell is running. And because it takes that over, you have very little space available to actually drag a cell with your mouse. So I just wanted to, because it's stalled, it's stalled both because there was a discussion about UX and because there were some things failing. So that there's still some coding to be done, but I wanted to see if people have thoughts or other ideas how to allow to have this run pattern on cell-by-cell basis without degrading the ability to rearrange cells easily using the mouse. I will send the pull request in the chat. And as well, whether anyone is particularly excited about this feature, like, yeah, would anyone else use it? Whether it was opt-in or opt-out. Nick?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this a number of times. You've got buttons that create ephemeral effects in the kernel. There would also be buttons that create persistent effects in the NB format in the cell that we've talked about. So bop, this is read only. Bop, it's write only. Whatever that means. The way that we had come to in thinking about how you would manage that whole superset of things is to not try and keep overloading the value of a specific quote unquote column of the UI, but to accept that we have columns, right? There is the first column, which is the cell identifier. There is the second column that, really each cell is 2 rows. It's an input row and an output row, and you might just not have anything. If you turn it to side by side, then you're splitting that row, right? You're doing a multi-index to, blow it back out like in a data frame. So I would not necessarily, people generally have screens that are much wider than they are tall. So horizontal space is much less valuable than vertical space. And changing things that people have come to expect, like being able to drag cells and quickly look down the side and see stuff and all that, I think is not worth whatever we would gain from stuffing a bunch of stuff inside of it. So I would see that as, if you want, you can enable a column of buttons. Maybe you've got 2 columns of buttons. Maybe you got your metadata, and all of those things can be configured to your liking. But I think just like, yep, we're going to start putting buttons where you had stuff, and guess what? Once you have a place to put buttons, people are going to put buttons on there from every single extension, and now you've got 50 buttons in the cell toolbar, 50 buttons in the notebook toolbar, 50 buttons in the input area. Like, that can't be. You can't let people. I can't take any more magic wands from AI plugins. I can't deal with it, right? There's only so many magic wands, and then they don't mean anything anymore. So anything that happens like this would have to like immediately start out at that user configurable place, ideally not editing raw JSON to do it. Sorry, Jason. And giving us some power back in terms of what is ending up on the screen. That is all.
Thanks, Nick. Sounds like you'd prefer, if we were going to add buttons, that they'd be configurable and maybe in a different column. Did I get that summary okay?
Right. I mean, we've got the heuristic based cell toolbar that doesn't, because it's heuristic based, it's not always right, and it can hide stuff, or it cannot show up when you expect things, or it can't redraw. when you redraw because it needs to look at the code mirror. So, you know, there is a nascent layout of a cell, and the stuff that Jeremy landed, where we really dig into that, but just for console cells, like you can change what's in the toolbar and what's side to side and all that. You know, I think we need to keep going on that and think about, at its very smallest, the smallest unit of Jupyter compute is one of these cells. And what is the thing? What is the underlying model that's going to let us have the things that we want? You know, as core maintainers, as extension authors, but are also going to let users get what they need for their UI to work properly. So I think changing existing UI things like the input area to have more stuff in them would be detrimental. Certainly make it harder for me to test things if I'm expecting to be able to click on the center of that area, and now I have to like look for some area that is not a button to be able to move it, you know. Yeah. So I would say, as it stands, thinking about adding buttons to input prompt area, cell toolbar, metadata sidebar, all those things need to be considered all together so that we might get to something better. Yeah. Because it's still really bad trying to use this on a mobile or touch device, right? Like, is that what is the button? Sorry, Mike. What is the button that you want that was desired to be put there? Because if it's run button, yeah, baby, that's a whole other question. If it's run button,
Yes, exactly. It is the run button, and
that's
I
different.
think
That's different.
what
That's
what
what
people,
Jupyter does, you know? Yeah, yeah. So there, you know, so thinking about that, not sorry to talk over you, but we've also talked about this, right? So you've got this button that is an identifier. Sometimes it's an identifier, sometimes it's a status indicator. You know, it's never a run button, but it always should have been a run button. That design, Adam, that should be our brand. That should be the whole thing. You know, like I press it and it has the little donut that goes around, or little moon spin around, or whatever. Like, this is the whole, what is Jupyter? It's that button, you know? So in this specific case, yes, let's overload that thing. The prompt area with the input number is not useful as an identifier or a way to link things or anything like that. So yeah, let's try it out, or let's make the prompt area more pluggable, independent of the cell renderer, and give extensions a place to try some stuff. Yeah, maybe that is it. Maybe it's making that.
so it is already kind of pluggable, because I can use Content Factory, Notebook panel Content Factory. I can swap that with a plugin. I can override it, and I can basically copy and paste this code. Now, I don't like this implementation in the sense that it says input prompt, but now it's also a run button. And I also am
But
not sure about the accessibility of this specific implementation. So what you
yeah,
mentioned previously about adding another column potentially to the left or right, it would like feel kind of conceptually more correct to have
yeah.
input prompt and next to it a run or buttons field, but then it would be very difficult, or at least much more difficult than currently it is, to overlay the two and to achieve this like hover over effect.
What is the hover? Sorry, what's the hover over effect?
Well, that it is showing over the execution counter
Oh,
right there. Yeah,
oh
that's
no,
what I mean.
we
Because
don't want that.
otherwise it would be
No, no,
next
no,
to
no.
it.
That's a total accessibility and mobile fail. That's useless. You know, like no one can get there. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
The thing is, people expect that because Colab does that.
That's
So
nice for collab.
there has been quite a few requests to, can we have something like that in the past? And I understand that, and I think that should be opt-in. Now, how are we going to do that? Like, how to what degree do we allow customization of the experience is also a question, and how to make it accessible. So yeah, I don't think we can merge this right now, even if all the tests were passing. And I think so far we discussed the accessibility problems, the loss of the existing function, or degradation of the ability to drag cells, and a slightly minor issue of, does it semantically belong in this widget, or should it be placed elsewhere? But I'm also like super interested to in general get a feel of how other people feel about having this feature in once we iterate on that.
Well, I mean, so you pull out Fitt's law, right? And it's the energy taken to whatever, yada yada yada, right? Jason, go for it.
I didn't interrupt. That's why I just raised my hand.
Oh, okay. It either goes on the far left or the far right. So the material design stuff puts stuff at the far right bottom right, but that presupposes that you're right-handed, because that's where your thumb would be on your phone. I don't know if I ever got into that, and we actively said we didn't want material design, so that's fine. But I would trust the Fitts law stuff. So having it to the far right feels a little bit more ephemeral. So if instead of doing anything to the input prompt, because like do run is an input, so I don't think that's wrong. But I think the whole only shows up when you hover is that we have not had this feature for 15 years. So how are you going to find out that it's there? And if you're on touchscreen, you won't. So yeah.
Just to quickly mention, there has been a discussion about placing it in the cell toolbar as well. And maybe all we need to do is to make it easy to place it in the cell toolbar, because it's already customizable. It's just that, it requires writing JSON or going through not very nice UI. But yeah, Jason.
There's been enough experimentation in front ends with all sorts of different front ends that I'm curious what a survey of where the play functionality is in different front ends, what that would yield. We do have, like, there's various front ends that have little tiny toolbars that pop up either, in the middle or off to the right. Play often has a special position because it's used so often. It's so natural of a thing to have available. I am curious what a survey would do. And I'll just say, from a user perspective, anecdotally, while I've watched people use various notebook tools, I've been surprised how much people click on the play button rather than doing Shift Enter, which I'm always like, my gut reaction is, wait, did you know you could do Shift Enter instead of like move your hand to the mouse and click on a button and everything? But I've been surprised at how much clicking a play button has been a natural part of people's workflow. Maybe William has data on this. Unfortunately, we don't have data on, how often is the play button clicked versus Shift Enter. How much of a user thing is this?
We accidentally removed our play button and we got immediately a bunch of complaints.
Yes, so exactly that. Okay.
It's a table stakes feature for people.
Yeah.
And it's not just because they don't want to use Shift Enter. They might be doing a presentation or something, or using a touch device, or it's just more convenient, or have a touch screen, or it's just yeah, I strongly agree. And also, it's a great idea to do a survey and look at what everyone else does. Because if there's a solution that is consistent with what the other front ends like Colab and CoCalc do somewhat, then maybe that could weight in that favor, just so that people can more easily switch between front ends.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's my thinking. But yeah, you really have to have a play button or a run button or whatever.
Yeah. And doesn't Jupyter Notebook, I remember we introduced the play button in the old Jupyter Notebook UI. Is
There's
anybody
definitely
looked
a
at
play
that
button
recently?
at the top. Like
Yeah.
in
We always have
Colab.
a play button at the top, but that's really inconvenient to always be
Yeah,
stretching all the way
it
to the
is.
top.
It's very
Yeah.
confusing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a cell action that
Yeah.
is related to the computation, not to the physical cell itself. So, it's a gateway to what's happening in your kernel. Because all the stuff on the cell toolbar right now is I'm going to structurally do something to my notebook, my .ipynb. It's not going to have any impact on what's happening inside of my kernel. It has no impact. None of those buttons do anything to a kernel. Having a restart and run up to here, oh, that'd be great. But so I think if there was a play button that is the default that is the default content of that thing, and then you give the user the ability to adjust what they mean. So, I always want to have run this cell in isolation of everything else. Run everything up to this cell. Run everything up to and before this cell. Whole iconographic nightmare, but like that would be the beginning of what do I mean to talk to my kernel? And then you can add your magic wand and it can read your social security number and lie to you, and that's great. But I think giving us a place to do things that are interacting with the kernel, having it right aligned with the kernel indicator up at the top, where our magic donut happens, would feel really good. And then let you move it around if you want it. So move it to the far left next to your thing if you want, move it to the far right by default or whatever. And then if you want to, I want something that's like CoCalc. Great, rad. I want something that's like Colab. Cool. Build profiles of that. Let people run that. Like, we don't have the resources or the data to say that we're right. What we do have is the convention to say, give people power to do what they want. And, we're better situated to do that than someone else.
Well, that's amazing. Reacting to what William shared. I actually didn't know that it works. Yeah. I was not aware of that option, and that would be so cool.
Yeah, we've had requests for run with metadata for certain kernels, right? That accept parameterization and stuff like that. So, I'm going to set up a specific kind of run just for this cell. There's tons of stuff that we're totally underserving by only offering complex chording as a way to get at the good stuff. We've got the good stuff. We just don't give it to you,
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a balance here between a clearly missing feature as far as other front ends and, for example, Williams' anecdotal evidence from CoCalc of like loud complaints. That is the play button or some mechanism for running, and a general design language around acting, interacting with your kernel, and layout of buttons and things like that. That's a much bigger project, but it feels like we can do a survey at least for the play button. I think you're right, Nick. In general, like the power of Jupyter is an extensible platform that's customizable, etc. Lets extensions add things, etc. But it feels like we could do a much smaller scope thing for the play slash interrupt maybe, or the run above, run below, etc. Functionality, and just do a survey and see what's out there as a first step.
Jason, by survey, do you mean like go look at CoCalc and Colab and any other front ends?
Yep.
Is there other front ends we should take a look at, anyone? Maybe we could post
There's a lot,
screenshots in
right?
the
VS
issue.
Code, Databricks.
DeepNote.
Yeah.
DeepNote has put a lot of effort into their unique ideas about a front end, so it's definitely worth looking at.
I assume Nick, it
then-
means Marimo, or maybe he means Mathematica and MATLAB and things like that. The big M's for notebooks, etc.
And then should we put the maybe screenshots from that in the issue that PR was linked to?
That's a good idea, but I unfortunately already did that in the PR.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe I should move my comment to the issue. I don't know.
The
Here.
PR is 6 months or 8 months old, right? And right now it would need to be rebased anyway. It's got some conflicts and stuff. Mike, you looked at that PR. Is the PR salvageable, or would we need to open a new PR?
It will need to be rebased because it touches on cell toolbar tracker, but I think those changes are not that important because we fixed a lot of issues in the meantime. So it would be mostly, yeah, the important parts around input prompt area can be easily lifted or rebased without too much effort.
Okay. I still conceptually, it seems like going into the issue is probably better than the PR. Because if we end up putting the play button in a very different place, it may be easier to do a different PR.
Okay. Yeah, maybe once it's benchmarked, we could get some design input or something on some preference. Anything else we want to discuss about that one for now? Anyone? Maybe once we have the screenshots, we should bring them back here. We could talk about more. Seems like it would be a really good feature. All right.
Yeah, and again, an interesting place to try that out is with that single embeddable cell that the previous release enabled, that 4.4 enabled. Thinking about, all right, I'm going to put the smallest piece of Jupyter in my documentation, which presently is Jupyter Lite, in an iframe inside of a thing. What does that run button look like when you are not in a notebook context, but like just what is the smallest REPL, the smallest REPL visualized loop look like? So does it belong there you go, exactly. To William's point, is it a transformer that goes from an input to an output and therefore would belong between the two things? So it's like directly showing that, or there's lots of directions that specific interaction could go, that might inform how we would think about a whole document. That is all. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So I added one topic to the accessibility triage. Maybe we could jump there next. This was brought up in April, has accessibility tag, and I think we've talked about it here. I guess there's this is in the notebook repo. There's a discussion about highlighting colors being difficult. And also it seems like there's some like coordination issues between like notebook search and the built-in browser search. And I guess frustration with not highlighting a text. And I thought it'd be good for us to bring this in here and talk about like what we could do, or I don't know if this is an actual bug where the search highlighting doesn't work, or if it's just problems with the colors for accessibility. And I can put this issue in chat as well. Saw Nikki mentioned in chat, native search is hard to test as well. Yeah, it's true. And Mike, you had some comments about default search, not, yeah, updates we made to improve search, which is great. Any thoughts about this, anyone, or what we could do to improve search for accessibility? I think some of this discussion was about customization so that searching doesn't clobber the browser search. Is that what this is?
Yes. So I think that there is some real question about the choice of colors for the search function, because they are meeting all the accessibility guidelines in the sense that the contrast is sufficient, but because the background color is very different from the background itself, because it's black, I think it is hard to read actually. Maybe not hard to read, but not easy on your eye. In a sense, like when you have a larger paragraph, I don't know if that makes sense. I will show my screen to demonstrate how. Oh, sorry, I cannot show my screen because you are sharing.
There you go.
Oh. Am I frozen? Okay, there it is. So you can see that for the active option, you do see the tests, and it's not bad, but the unselected matches, these have like a white text on a black background. So I do sympathize that there is potentially some way to improve that. We can also see how it looks like in a dark theme.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Okay, so it does change depending on the theme. That's good.
So again, we could look at other software. I think it is pretty common to use the yellow to highlight the active match. That shouldn't be controversial. But the inactive matches, how do we highlight them in the context of potentially syntax highlighted code, which then restricts usage of some colors, or at least I'm not sure if it restricts that. But there are some interactions. There is also interaction with the debugger, because with the debugger you can have a line highlighted when there's like a when it's paused on a breakpoint. So yeah, help that would be welcome, and then actually making the changes is not that difficult. It's just swapping some CSS variables.
Can you illustrate what the accessibility complaint was? I'm not understanding the things aren't highlighted anymore sentence.
I do not know that. Like that would need to go back to the issue, but what I think some complaint might be about is just the choice of the colors. But what is not highlighted is if I were to print it out, there's an issue about this. The output that is not highlighted until I click search cell outputs, and I think this is very unfortunate. Yeah, and I cannot select that. Actually might be a bug which is not tracked, that active selection is not highlighted in the output. But yeah, this is a common complaint, that search in outputs is not enabled by default.
Yeah. Are those marks, or are those somehow done with, they are full-on marks?
Well, it depends on the output, because if that's an SVG picture, then we cannot use marks because there are no marks in SVG. But for the most part, these are marks.
Yeah, don't go foreign objecting. That sounds bad. Yeah, it's hard. You can do outline. That wouldn't really feel right.
Yes.
That does work.
And maybe maybe we could even use like whatever the browser is using, because there are some special values, but I'm not sure if the support is there for it to be a cross-browser solution. And then JupyterLab has its own themes, so it would potentially interact, and we would not be readable depending on the theme that you have set.
I am curious if you did a browser search here. So what was that? Command Shift F or Command F twice or something?
Yeah, so
You might have to hamburger it.
there we go.
Yeah. So
So
it's
it's
yellow,
yellow
and if you
and
change the
orange.
theme, is it still yellow? Like, does it interact with the theming?
Wait, actually, let me cancel that one first. Not really, but it's still readable.
Yeah. And if you remove the highlighting, then it goes back to being a white text, a red text, yeah, on black background. Okay.
I can also check this one.
Yeah. I mean, search is such a big deal. I wish you could tear it off and put it in a sidebar or put it in a main area widget or something like that. And that would give us some different problems. But yeah, been looking at that in the documentation tip, right? Like once you have any facets, like right now we have one facet, which is, or we have two, search in selection and search in output, and you can toggle those on or off, but those don't really have any other values associated with them. So it's like, I want to look for all cells that are marked down. Well, you can't. That's just not a thing we're going to give you. So even where we're at right now, we have more stuff that we probably could be doing. I'm sure we're looking at the full cell model, right? Like we're not looking inside the code mirror. I hope, Lord. Yeah, it's just a very hard thing to get.
So what's the next step here?
I think it'd be good for us to respond if there's another issue besides the colors. I agree, it's not that clear, Jason, as to what you said. I don't know if there's some way we could make our colors the same as the browser's colors, which I think varies by browser or something, doesn't it? But
That's right. Mike might be right, but it takes a little research to see if they expose the browser colors, but then it may not be cross-browser. But at least we could do it in Chrome. Problem, I guess, is Chrome exposes it.
yeah. Okay.
And it seems like there's some clarification still needed. Like, I don't understand this. Doesn't even highlight the text I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Or I actually don't even understand what dark light screens are. Is that a high contrast screen?
Yeah, it may not be English as their first language.
Yeah.
Safari.
I'm not blaming you, I'm asking. Yeah.
Safari is specifically called out as being at issue here. So if someone's got a fruit box,
wait, Safari is only an issue with that's a side conversation for men about disabling keyboard shortcuts. That has nothing to do with yeah, good call out to recognize Safari, but yeah, that's a side conversation here.
We just have no data from the original reporter.
Yeah.
As to what they're trying to achieve and where.
Yeah, and it looks like they reported and never responded, Mike, to Mike's questions about clarification. Okay, so it sounds like Mike brings up some good points that were not perfect in our highlighting, but we can't reproduce what it feels like the original complaint was.
Yeah, so I can take on responding to the issue, and then yeah, it sounds like we need some type of color investigation if we were going to fix it. at least the color part. But at least clarifying that there's not like some issue with searching. It's just maybe the colors aren't the best. Or if there is an issue, then we need to know what it is or what browser.
Yeah, even posting a screenshot, I think, would help us a lot.
Yeah. Okay, anything else about that topic?
I guess one last thing, are there settings there? I saw a link to a shortcut, but are there settings related to the search UI experience that someone could fix without, installing some other plugin or editing a JSON file in disk or something? Is there somewhere that little drop down could say edit search configuration options and dump you over there and then have a whole bunch of things to explore? That might be something.
We can hear you, Nick, but it sounds like, at least I'm getting feedback off your mic. But I heard you say, hey, is there some type of configuration that could be part of the search dropdown?
There are settings which configure how search behaves. For example, we have a setting on whether pressing Ctrl F should automatically use the selection or only automatically populate the search bar with selection if it's not multi-line or this kind of stuff. So yes, we could link to that search page from a little cog.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, that was, I think maybe that wraps up that topic. I think that was the only accessibility topic we had. I see no offline topics either. I had one other quick announcement. We released Gator 6.0, which is the environment package management plugin that needed JupyterLab 4 support. So it supports JupyterLab 4 now. It was a lot of a lot of work bringing it back from the dead, so to speak. There's still things we need to work on and getting it to work. Some of the UI components of the latest version of JupyterLab, we're still working on that, but yeah, this is in JupyterLab 4, and yeah, we have this back, and I know this isn't the only package environment management plugin, but I think it's a pretty important one for especially like the practitioner wanting to manage their packages. So I just thought I'd give a quick shout out about that. And Rosio did a lot of that work while working with me, so that was really good. Upgrading extensions to JupyterLab 4 was definitely a fun experience. All right, those were all the topics.
Wait, if you have a hot take on that, I'm
yeah.
curious what the experience, like, where were the pain points and how can we make it better in upgrading to JupyterLab 5?
It's on my to-do list. Maybe we could work on updating the migration guide, but the current migration guide's like, here's this script. It's pretty much what it is, but and a whole list of things that broke or something and changing. But the problem with a script is it requires a big bang migration, and trying to do that with this plugin was not possible. And I think both Rosio and Eric tried to use that script and pick up what Frederic had started with the script, but we had to use more of like an incremental approach and upgrade things step by step and keep Jupyter 3 and 4 support going as long as possible. And then once everything was working, drop JupyterLab 3. So maybe the docs could be improved to kind of describe an approach like that and how to go about that, because they don't really talk about that at all right now. So
how much effort do you think it took you? Person hours or even just wall clock time?
I don't know it was about like maybe, I don't know, Rosie and I both spent a lot of time on it, but probably like 2 person months to upgrade everything.
Person months?
Yeah. Or
wow.
Two
okay.
months, 1 person for 2 months. Yeah. Like full-time work. Yeah. Because it was like changing build systems, everything had to be upgraded, right? It was not like this is a up-to-date extension. and we just need to flip the switch and change some dependencies. It was a ton of work. So yep.
Wow. Okay, that's much longer than I would have guessed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. One. And on the other hand, clearly this might be a sticking point for others as well, because you're heavily invested in this. I'd hate to see how many extensions are dropped because that is way too much effort.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe we could help others as well make that. And it's probably not going to be the only breaking change ever in Jupyter, so making that experience better the next time as well is good.
Yeah, it's kind of like testing tools. You can't have these things. You can't have compatibility layers like built into your tool, because then you can never get rid of anything. So you can't. And if you're testing tools inside your product, then you can't test anything that's not the version that you have along with it. So it's kind of both of those things. Like you drop, I can't even imagine what was the hardest thing in there. Probably some services stuff got in your way and stuff like that, right? But we try and be very conservative with changes to services for the most part. But yeah, I mean, if you get into the notebook cells and things like that, things changed so much between 3.6 and 3.7, and then changed even more to 4, and then changed even more on 4.1. That was a very bad stretch for people that wanted to keep their extensions working. And so, what could make sense, and this was proposed, I remember sitting around the room back in Berkeley in like 2018, is like, we should write this for jQuery for JupyterLab. And so that you could bring an NB extension across and, expose all the APIs and stuff like that. And I can't even imagine trying to keep a jQuery thing running against some, RTC back kernel and eventually, or, RTC back document. Like that's what people would have expected that to continue to be able to do. So that wouldn't have happened. That would, trying to keep that running would not have worked. But yeah, I mean, in a few places, I've made some shims that help you keep stuff moving forward, and continue to keep older versions of Lab under test. It's pretty frustrating as an author, for sure, to not be able to rely on any of this stuff to work between minor versions, or patch versions, right? Like So, and on that end, what is your testing regime like for that? Because it's pretty big. It does a lot. Gator does a lot of things. So is it, do you have it under full UI test, or is it just kind of good luck? Or
There is some JavaScript tests and some Python tests, but some of that could be improved. Yeah, really good points, Nick. I think we should stop here because I know it's top of the hour. Let me stop the recording.